The day I came home early was the day my marriage ended, though I didn't know it yet. If you're new to this channel, just subscribe now, and say it in the comment section. Adaobi Okafor had always trusted her instincts in business, but when it came to her home, she preferred faith over suspicion. That Tuesday afternoon in Lagos was not supposed to be part of her schedule. She was meant to be in Abuja, closing a contract that would expand her interior design firm into government projects. Instead, she stood outside her own front door in Lekki, suitcase in hand, her flight abruptly cancelled due to what the airline described as operational issues. At first, she had been irritated. Then she smiled. Maybe this was fate giving her a rare gift, an unscripted moment. She imagined Emeka's surprised face. She pictured little Chisholm running into her arms. The thought warmed her as she unlocked the door quietly, balancing her heels in one hand to avoid the clicking sound against the tiled floor. The house felt different the moment she stepped inside. It wasn't messy. It wasn't broken. It was simply still. Too still. Chisholm's math lessons usually happened at 2 p.m. sharp. By now, there should have been the sound of pencil scratching against paper, her daughter's dramatic sighs whenever fractions appeared, and Miss Tai-Tai Adebayo's gentle but firm voice saying, "Focus, Chisholm. You can do it." Instead, silence lingered in the air like a held breath. Adaobi placed her suitcase down slowly. "Hello," she called softly, not wanting to ruin the surprise completely. No response. Then she heard it. A laugh. Soft. Feminine. Followed by a man's voice she knew better than her own heartbeat. Emeka. It wasn't the tone he used when discussing school fees or diesel prices. It was lighter. Playful. Intimate. Adaobi's chest tightened, but she refused to jump to conclusions. She walked toward the sitting room, each step measured, controlled. The closer she got, the clearer the voices became. "You're too much," Miss Tai-Tai's voice said, followed by another laugh, this one lower, almost shy. "Am I?" Emeka replied. "You haven't seen anything yet." Adaobi's hand froze against the wall. The words were harmless on their own. Context made them heavy. She turned the corner. And everything shifted. Emeka was seated on the large grey sectional couch. Miss Tai-Tai sat beside him. Too close. Their knees touched. Her hand rested lightly on his thigh, fingers curved as though they had always belonged there. His body leaned toward hers in a way that had once been reserved for Adaobi alone. For a full 3 seconds, nobody moved. Miss Tai-Tai saw her first. The young woman's eyes widened, her smile collapsing like a house of cards. She jumped up so quickly that the decorative throw pillow fell to the floor. "Madam," she gasped. Emeka turned. The color drained from his face. "Ada, you're back." The air felt thick. Adaobi looked at them carefully, almost clinically. She took in the untouched math textbooks on the center table. The closed exercise book. The fact that there was no sign of her daughter anywhere in sight. "I decided to surprise my family," she said calmly. Her voice surprised even her. It didn't shake. It didn't rise. It simply existed. Miss Tai-Tai bent quickly to pick up the pillow, as though tidying the room could erase what had just been seen. "We were just discussing Chisholm's progress in mathematics," she said hurriedly. "Sir was asking about her homework schedule." Emeka nodded too fast. "Yes. Exactly. You know how I like to stay involved." Adaobi's eyes drifted to Miss Tai-Tai's hand, now firmly by her side. "Does involvement require sitting that close?" she asked quietly. Neither answered. Silence stretched between them like a rope about to snap. Emeka stood up, attempting confidence. "Why didn't you tell me your flight was cancelled?" "I wanted to see your natural reaction," Adaobi replied. Miss Tai-Tai swallowed visibly. She looked younger than her 26 years in that moment, fragile and cornered. The scent of her perfume, floral, sweet, unfamiliar, hung faintly in the air. It wasn't a scent Adaobi owned. Adaobi walked to the center table and picked up Chisholm's math textbook. She flipped it open. Blank page. The date written at the top. No work done. She must be on a short break, Emeka said quickly. Where is she? Adaobi asked. The question landed with weight. In her room, Emeka replied after a second too long. She felt sleepy. Adaobi held his gaze. In 8 years of marriage, she had learned his tells. The slight twitch in his left eyebrow when he lied. The way his shoulders stiffened when cornered. She saw both now. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the staircase. Her heartbeat was loud in her ears, but her steps remained steady. Each stair felt heavier than the last. Behind her, she could sense movement, whispering perhaps, but she didn't turn around. She reached Chisholm's bedroom door and pushed it open gently. The curtains were half drawn, letting in soft afternoon light. The bed was neatly made. Too neatly. No rumpled sheets. No scattered crayons. No sign of an 8-year-old who had supposedly been napping. Chisholm. Adaobi called. Nothing. She checked the bathroom. Empty. Her stomach dropped. Adaobi walked back downstairs, slower this time. Emeka and Miss Tai stood awkwardly near the couch, like students waiting outside a principal's office. She's not upstairs, Adaobi said. Emeka's lips parted, then closed. Maybe she went to the kitchen. Adaobi's patience thinned. Emeka. She said his name fully, deliberately. Where is our daughter? Miss Tai composure cracked first. Tears pooled in her eyes. Madam, please don't misunderstand. Answer me, Adaobi said, still calm but firmer now. Emeka exhaled sharply. She's fine. I asked my sister to keep her for a few hours. She needed a change of environment. Adaobi blinked slowly. During her scheduled lesson? It was spontaneous, he muttered. And you didn't think to inform me. You were traveling. The excuses piled up, weak and thin. Adaobi felt something inside her shift, not explosive anger, not yet. It was a quiet recalibration. Pieces rearranging themselves into a clearer picture. Miss Tai wiped her tears. I should go, she whispered. Yes, Adaobi said. You should. Emeka looked like he wanted to protest, but he didn't. He watched silently as Miss Tai grabbed her handbag, avoided eye contact, and hurried toward the door. The soft click of it closing echoed through the house. Now it was just husband and wife. Emeka ran a hand through his hair. You're overreacting. Nothing happened. Adaobi studied him. The man she had built a life with. The father of her child. The partner she had defended countless times in conversations with friends who whispered about unfaithful husbands in Lagos estates just like theirs. I didn't shout, she said evenly. I didn't accuse. I simply observed. He stepped closer. Ada, you know I love you. Love. The word felt strangely distant. She picked up her suitcase from where she had dropped it earlier. Call your sister, she said. Tell her I'm coming to get my daughter. He frowned. There's no need. There is every need. For the first time since she entered the house, her voice carried steel. Emeka hesitated, then reached for his phone. Adaobi walked toward the door, her mind unusually clear. The surprise she had planned had indeed happened, but not in the way she imagined. Something in her marriage had cracked that afternoon. She didn't yet know how deep the fracture ran, but she felt it. As she stepped outside into the humid Lagos air, one truth settled firmly in her chest: whatever was happening inside her home would no longer happen in the shadows. Adaobi did not cry in the car. That alone unsettled Emeka more than shouting ever could. They drove in silence toward his sister Ifunanya's house in Chevron. The hum of the engine filled the space between them, thick and suffocating. Emeka kept stealing glances at his wife, expecting tears, anger, something explosive. Instead, her face remained composed, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. Finally, he cleared his throat. "You're making this bigger than it is." Adaobi did not look at him. "How big is it?" "It was just conversation. You walked in at the wrong time and misunderstood." She turned slowly. "You sent our daughter away so you could have a conversation with her lesson teacher." He hesitated. "I told you she needed a change of environment." Adaobi let out a soft breath, almost a laugh, but without humor. "Emeka, Chisholm loves her lessons. She doesn't even like missing school, and suddenly she needed fresh air." He gripped the steering wheel tighter. "You've been traveling a lot. Things at home get overwhelming. Overwhelming enough to replace your wife with her employee. That's not fair." She fell quiet again. Silence was her new weapon. They arrived at Ifunanya's house 15 minutes later. It was a modest duplex, painted cream, with bougainvillea flowers climbing the fence. Ifunanya opened the door before they knocked, as if she had been watching from the window. "Ada!" "You're back," she said, surprise flickering across her face. "Yes," Adaobi replied evenly. "I came to pick up my daughter." Ifunanya's eyes darted briefly toward Emeka. Something unspoken passed between them. Adaobi noticed. She noticed everything now. Chisholm came running from the living room. "Mummy!" The sound of her daughter's voice cracked something inside Adaobi's chest. She knelt and wrapped her arms around the little girl, inhaling the familiar scent of coconut oil and baby soap. "Why are you here, my love?" Adaobi asked gently. "Daddy said I should come and stay with Auntie for small time," Chisholm replied innocently. "He said you were busy." Adaobi stood slowly, her hand still resting protectively on her daughter's shoulder. "Thank you for keeping her," she told Ifunanya. Ifunanya nodded quickly. "It was nothing. Emeka just said he had some work at home." "Work?" Adaobi smiled politely. "We'll be going now." The drive back felt heavier. Chisholm chatted happily in the back seat, unaware of the tension stretching across the front. "Mummy, Miss Tai said I'm improving in fractions," she announced proudly. "That's wonderful," Adaobi replied softly. Emeka's jaw tightened. When they arrived home, Adaobi instructed Chisholm to go upstairs and change into comfortable clothes. "I'll come and check your homework soon," she said. The moment her daughter disappeared up the stairs, Adaobi turned to Emeka. "Sit," she said. He frowned. "Ada." "Sit." Something in her tone made him obey. He lowered himself onto the couch, the same couch where she had found him earlier. Adaobi remained standing. "How long?" He blinked. "How long what?" "How long have you been sending Chisholm away?" He hesitated. "Not long." She folded her arms. "Defined not long." "A few weeks." "A few weeks?" Her voice remained calm, but her eyes sharpened. "During those weeks, how many times did you bring that woman into my home?" He exhaled sharply. "Ada, nothing happened." "Then why did you need privacy?" He didn't answer. The truth sat between them, undeniable now. Adaobi walked to the center table and picked up Miss Tai's forgotten pen. She rolled it between her fingers. "Did you think I would never find out?" He stood abruptly. "It wasn't serious." "That's your defense?" she asked quietly. "That it wasn't serious?" He ran a hand over his face. "It was a mistake. It just happened." "No," Adaobi corrected softly. "Mistakes happen once. You planned this. You coordinated pickups. You involved your sister." She didn't know why, he snapped. "But you did." The words landed heavy. He looked at her, frustration mixing with guilt. You've been distant, Ada. Always busy. Always traveling. Sometimes I feel like a guest in my own house. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. So you decided to invite someone else to make you feel at home. That's not what I'm saying. It is exactly what you're saying. The argument hovered on the edge of escalation, but Adaobi pulled it back. She refused to give him the chaos he might use later to justify himself. Is it emotional? She asked calmly. He looked confused. What? Are you in love with her? The question hung in the air like a blade. He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked away. That was answer enough. Adaobi nodded slowly, absorbing the impact without letting it show. Does she know you're married? Of course she knows. And she still agreed to this? He didn't respond. Upstairs, Chisholm's faint humming drifted down the staircase. The innocence of it made the situation feel even uglier. Adaobi walked toward the staircase but stopped midway. She turned back. You will end it. Emeka stiffened. You don't get to order me. Her gaze hardened. I absolutely do. You betrayed me in my own home. You involved our child. You lied repeatedly. I am still speaking calmly. Do not mistake that for weakness. He swallowed. You will call her, she continued. In front of me. And you will end whatever this is. His pride flared. You're humiliating me. She stared at him. You humiliated yourself. For a long moment, neither moved. Finally, he reached for his phone. His fingers hovered over the screen. He hesitated. Adaobi watched closely. Every second of delay confirmed what she already suspected. This was not a small flirtation. It was something that had roots. He dialed. The phone rang once. Twice. Then connected. Hello? Miss Taitai's voice came through, cautious. Emeka cleared his throat. Taitai. Adaobi stood silently beside him, arms folded. I can't continue, he said stiffly. It's over. There was silence on the other end. Then a shaky whisper. Because she found out. Yes. Another pause. Is that what you want? Emeka glanced at Adaobi. For a split second, uncertainty flickered across his face. Adaobi felt it like a physical blow. Yes, he said finally. It's what I want. Miss Taitai inhaled sharply. Okay, she whispered. The line disconnected. Emeka lowered the phone slowly. There, he said. Satisfied. Adaobi studied him carefully. She had asked for an action. He had performed it. But something felt incomplete, unresolved. This isn't finished, she said quietly. What else do you want? He demanded. The truth, she replied. All of it. He hesitated again. And Adaobi realized something that unsettled her even more than the affair itself. She had only uncovered the surface. Beneath it, there was something deeper, something more deliberate than stolen moments on a couch. She didn't know it yet, but the lies had layers. And she had only just begun peeling them back. The house did not feel like home anymore. Adaobi sat across from Emeka at the dining table later that evening, the overhead chandelier casting sharp light across his face. Chisholm was upstairs asleep. Adaobi had insisted on personally supervising her homework, bath, and bedtime. She needed the reassurance of routine. Now, there were no distractions. Just truth waiting to be dragged into the open. You said you'd tell me everything, Adaobi began quietly. Emeka leaned back in his chair. There's nothing more to say. She held his gaze. You don't get to decide that. He looked tired, irritated. It started 3 months ago. Adaobi said nothing. She let him continue. She came highly recommended. Good with children. Polite. Respectful. You were traveling more. I was home most afternoons. We talked. That's how it began. Talking, Adaobi repeated. Yes. And when did talking become sending our daughter away? His jaw tightened. It wasn't like that at first. But it became like that, she pressed. He exhaled slowly. We needed privacy. The bluntness stung more than any excuse. Adaobi absorbed it without flinching. How many times? I don't know. You counted business profits down to the naira. You can count this. He looked away. Maybe 8. 10 times. 8 to 10 afternoons in her home. On her couch. While her daughter believed she was simply visiting her aunt. Adaobi clasped her hands together on the table to steady them. Did you ever think about the risk? What risk? Bringing someone into your child's safe space. Involving your sister. What if Chisholm had come back unexpectedly? What if a neighbor had seen something? He rubbed his forehead. It wasn't supposed to get complicated. But it did. Silence settled between them again. Adaobi stood abruptly. Give me your phone. He frowned. For what? For transparency. You don't trust me. She stared at him. That question is insulting. After a moment of hesitation, he unlocked the phone and handed it over. Adaobi sat back down and began scrolling. Messages. Emails. Call logs. He had deleted most of their conversations. That alone was telling. But deletion never erased everything. She opened his bank app next. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Routine expenses. Fuel. Business payments. Then she saw it. Transfers. Multiple transfers. To an account saved under the name TA. Her heart pounded harder now, not from heartbreak, but from something colder. Calculation. She opened one receipt. 450,000 Nigerian nairas. Another. 320,000 Nigerian nairas. Another. 600,000 Nigerian nairas. Her voice remained steady. Why are you sending her money? He stiffened. It was support. Support for what? She was struggling. With what exactly? He didn't answer. Adaobi scrolled further back. The pattern stretched over weeks. The total was far beyond casual generosity. It was deliberate funding. Her eyes narrowed. Then she saw it. A transfer scheduled, but not yet completed. 5 million Nigerian nairas. The description field read, for our plan. Almost time. The air left her lungs slowly. She lifted her eyes to meet his. What plan? Emeka's face drained of color. Ada, it's not what you think. Then explain what I should think. He stood abruptly. You're twisting everything. She rose too, phone still in hand. You are moving large sums of money to your mistress. You wrote to our plan. And you expect me not to twist. He paced the room. It was just words. 5 million naira is not just words. The truth hovered dangerously close now. Upstairs, the house remained quiet. Adaobi's mind raced. Joint savings. Investment accounts. Education fund for Chisholm. She mentally calculated what had been withdrawn recently. Some transactions she had ignored, trusting him to manage certain aspects of their shared finances. Trust. Where is the money coming from? She asked calmly. Our account, he muttered. Our. Yes. Which one? He hesitated again. Adaobi opened another app, one linked to their joint savings. The balance was lower than she remembered. Not drastically at once, but gradually. Like water leaking from a cracked tank. "You've been moving it slowly," she said. He didn't deny it. "Why?" His voice dropped. "Because I was going to leave." The words hit harder than the affair. Adaobi did not blink. "Leave who?" "You." "For her?" He didn't respond. "That's the plan," she asked quietly. "Drain our accounts. Use our daughter's education fund. Then disappear." "It wasn't like that," he snapped. "Then describe it accurately." He stopped pacing. For a moment, his shoulders sagged. "I felt trapped. In a house you built with me. In a life that stopped feeling like mine." She absorbed that. "So you decided to build a new one. Funded by me." His silence confirmed it. Adaobi felt something inside her settle, not shatter, not rage. Settle. Like dust after a storm revealing the full damage. "Does she know about the money?" "Yes." And she agreed. "She believed in us." The audacity almost made her laugh. "Believed in what?" "Betrayal." He flinched. Adaobi walked toward the staircase, then paused halfway. "Call her." He looked alarmed. "Why?" "Because I want to hear it from her." "This is unnecessary." "No," she said firmly. "It is necessary." Reluctantly, he dialed. Miss Tai answered on the third ring, her voice small. "Hello?" Adaobi took the phone before Emeka could speak. "This is Adaobi." A sharp inhale came from the other end. "I'll keep this simple," Adaobi continued calmly. "Were you aware that my husband was transferring money from our joint accounts to you?" Silence. Then a shaky reply. "He said he was separating his finances." "Did he mention our daughter's education fund?" Another pause. Longer this time. "No," Miss Tai whispered. Adaobi's eyes flicked to Emeka. He looked away. "Did you discuss leaving Nigeria?" Adaobi asked. Miss Tai began to cry softly. "He said once everything was settled, we could start fresh somewhere else." The words confirmed what the bank receipts had suggested. This was not fantasy. It was logistics. Adaobi felt cold clarity wash over her. "Thank you," she said quietly, and ended the call. She handed the phone back to Emeka. "You involved my child. You stole from her future. And you expected to walk away quietly." He opened his mouth to defend himself, but no argument remained strong enough. Upstairs, Chisholm shifted in her sleep. Adaobi looked at the staircase again. "You will not move another naira," she said firmly. "Not tonight. Not ever again without my knowledge." He scoffed weakly. "And what will you do?" She met his eyes steadily. "I will protect what is mine." Adaobi did not sleep that night. She lay beside Emeka in the same bed they had shared for 8 years, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing while her mind worked with ruthless precision. Betrayal hurt, but financial betrayal required action. And Adaobi had never been a woman who froze under pressure. At 4:12 a.m., she quietly slipped out of bed. She walked into her home office, closed the door gently, and turned on her laptop. The glow of the screen illuminated her face, calm and focused. First, she opened every account linked to their names. Joint savings. Investment portfolios. Business accounts where she was listed as co-director. The education fund created the day Chisholm was born. She began downloading statements. Every transaction for the last 6 months. By 5:03 a.m., she had a folder titled Evidence. She printed nothing. She made no noise. She simply documented. At 6:15 a.m., she sent a brief email to her lawyer, Barrister Namdi Ease, a man known for discretion. Urgent. Need immediate consultation regarding asset protection and custody. She did not elaborate. She did not dramatize. She attached the transaction summaries. Then she made tea and returned to the bedroom before Emeka stirred. When he woke, she was already dressed for the day. "You're up early," he muttered. "Yes." He studied her carefully. "Are we going to talk about this?" "We already did," she replied. "That's it?" "You're just calm." She gave a faint smile. "Should I be hysterical?" He looked uncomfortable. "I said I'd stop." "You said many things," she responded quietly. Downstairs, Chisholm prepared for school, unaware of the silent war unfolding between her parents. Adaobi moved with gentle efficiency, braiding her daughter's hair, packing her lunch, kissing her forehead. "Have a good day, my love," she whispered. "You too, Mummy." The front door closed. The house felt heavier again. Emeka sat at the dining table, coffee untouched. "I can fix this," he said suddenly. Adaobi looked at him. "Fix what exactly?" "Our marriage." She tilted her head slightly. "You had a plan to leave." He rubbed his temples. "I was confused." Confusion does not wire 5 million naira. His silence returned. Her phone buzzed. A reply from Barrister Nnamdi. "Come to my office by 10 a.m. Bring all documentation. Do not alert him yet." She locked the screen. "I have a meeting this morning," she said calmly. "With who?" Emeka asked. "Business." That word again. Business. The one thing she understood better than emotion. At 9:45 a.m., Adaobi walked into her lawyer's office in Victoria Island. The receptionist greeted her warmly, unaware that her world had shifted overnight. Barrister Nnamdi met her personally at the door. He was in his late 40s, sharp-eyed, composed. "You sounded urgent," he said once they were seated. She slid her tablet across the desk. "Read." He did. Slowly. Carefully. When he finished, he removed his glasses. "Is he aware you know this much?" "Yes." "And?" "He thinks I'm angry. He doesn't yet understand I'm strategic." A faint smile touched the lawyer's lips. "Good." They spoke for over an hour. Asset structures. Ownership titles. Authorization thresholds. Custody rights. Emergency financial holds. "You're fortunate," Nnamdi finally said. "The house is registered solely in your name. He cannot sell or leverage it without you." Adaobi nodded. She had insisted on that years ago under the guise of tax efficiency. "The business shares?" she asked. "You hold majority. However, if he attempts to liquidate minor shares quietly, we can file an injunction." "And the joint accounts?" "We freeze them immediately." She inhaled slowly. "Do it." He studied her face. "Are you certain?" "Yes. Once we begin, there is no quiet reconciliation." She held his gaze. He ended quiet reconciliation when he planned to disappear. By noon, formal notices were in motion. Temporary restrictions. Notifications to banks. Legal documentation drafted. When Adaobi returned home that afternoon, Emeka was on the phone in the living room. His voice sounded tense. "What do you mean restricted?" he demanded. "I made that transfer yesterday." Adaobi stepped inside calmly. "Yes, I'm a signatory," he continued angrily. "Why would authorization change?" He turned and saw her. His expression shifted instantly. The call ended. "What did you do?" he asked. She placed her handbag on the table deliberately. "I protected my assets." "You froze the accounts." "Yes." "You had no right." She laughed softly. Check the documentation. I absolutely do. His anger rose. You're trying to ruin me. No, she corrected. You tried to ruin me. He paced again, frustration boiling. That transfer was important. For your plan, she asked. His silence answered. The 5 million, she continued. It requires dual authorization now. You changed the authorization structure. Yes. When? Months ago. He stared at her, stunned. Why? She met his eyes evenly. Because I sensed something. He shook his head slowly, disbelief creeping in. You planned this? No, she said calmly. I prepared. He looked as though the ground had shifted beneath him. The control he believed he held had evaporated overnight. Did you think I wouldn't notice money disappearing? She asked. Did you think I built my career by ignoring numbers? He sank onto the couch heavily. For the first time, fear appeared in his eyes, not fear of losing her emotionally, but fear of losing security. And Miss Tai-Tai, he asked quietly. She will not be coming here again. She's expecting. Expectations are dangerous things, Adaobi interrupted. Her phone buzzed again. A confirmation email, account restriction successful. Pending transfer cancelled. She showed him the screen. Almost time, she read from his own note. It seems time has been adjusted. He covered his face with his hands. What do you want? He asked finally. Adaobi looked around the living room, the couch, the polished floors, the framed family photos still hanging on the wall. I want stability for my daughter, she said quietly. And accountability from you. He lowered his hands. Are you filing for divorce? The word hung between them, heavy but inevitable. I am filing for protection, she replied. What happens next depends on you. He searched her face for softness. There was none left. That afternoon, something irreversible settled into place. Not explosive. Not dramatic. Just final in a way that could not be undone by apologies or late-night promises. For the first time since she walked in unexpectedly, Emeka understood the gravity of what he had done. He had not just been caught. He had been outmaneuvered. By evening, the news had begun to spread quietly within the estate, not details, just tension. In places like Lekki, silence had a sound. Neighbors noticed when a man who once waved confidently at security suddenly drove in without eye contact. They noticed when lawyers' cars appeared more than once in a week. Inside the house, the atmosphere had changed completely. Emeka moved differently now. Slower. Measured. He no longer barked instructions at the domestic staff. He no longer made casual financial decisions. Every call he received, he stepped outside to answer. Adaobi observed everything. 3 days after freezing the accounts, Barrister Namdi sent over the initial custody paperwork. It was temporary, just precautionary measures ensuring that no child could be removed from the state without written consent from both parents. When she placed the document on the dining table, Emeka stared at them like they were foreign objects. You filed already, he asked quietly. I filed for protection, she corrected. You're making this public. I'm making it legal. He shook his head slowly. You didn't even give me time to fix things. She looked at him calmly. You gave yourself 3 months to build an exit plan. He had no response to that. Upstairs, Chisholm laughed at a cartoon, unaware that the structure of her home was being renegotiated beneath her feet. That sound was Adaobi's anchor. Every decision she made circled back to one person. 2 days later, Miss Tai-Tai attempted to enter the estate. The security gate stopped her. Her access had been revoked. Adaobi had anticipated the possibility of emotional recklessness. She had formally terminated Miss Tai-Tai's employment via email, copying her lawyer. 1 month's salary in lieu of notice was transferred from Adaobi's personal account, not the joint one. Clean. Traceable. Final. When Emeka found out, he confronted her in the kitchen. "You didn't have to humiliate her," he said. Adaobi turned from the stove slowly. "She was paid to teach my child. She cared about me. She participated in stealing from my daughter." He fell silent. There was a knock at the door. Barrister Nnamdi entered shortly after, briefcase in hand. Emeka stiffened immediately. "We need to discuss asset separation terms," the lawyer said calmly. "Separation?" Emeka echoed. "Temporary," Adaobi replied. They sat at the dining table again, the battlefield of the week. Documents were laid out methodically. "The house remains solely in Madam's name," Nnamdi stated. "Mr. Okafor retains minority shares in the logistics business, but dividend access will require transparency audits moving forward." Emeka leaned back. "So I'm being stripped?" "You attempted to liquidate joint funds," the lawyer said evenly. "This is containment." "And custody?" Emeka asked, voice tight. "Primary residential custody remains with Madam," Nnamdi continued. "You will have structured visitation until the court formalizes arrangements." Emeka's composure cracked slightly. "You think I'd take my own child?" Adaobi finally spoke. "I think you were planning to leave the country." The truth landed again, heavy and undeniable. He stared at her for a long moment. "I wouldn't have taken her without telling you." She met his eyes. "You were already taking money without telling me." The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end, signatures were pending, negotiations open, but the power dynamic had permanently shifted. That night, Emeka packed a small suitcase. "You're leaving?" Adaobi asked from the hallway. "For now," he replied. "It's obvious I'm not welcome." She didn't argue. "Where will you go?" "To Ifunanya's." She nodded once. "Call before you visit Chisholm." He paused at the door. For a split second, regret flickered across his face, not for the money, not even fully for the affair, but for miscalculating the woman he married. "I never thought you'd react like this," he admitted quietly. Adaobi's voice remained steady. "You never thought I'd find out." He left. The door closed gently behind him. No shouting. No shattered glass. Just the quiet end of a version of their life. Upstairs, Adaobi sat on Chisholm's bed while her daughter brushed her doll's hair. "Where is Daddy going?" Chisholm asked innocently. "He has some things to sort out," Adaobi replied softly. "Did he do something wrong?" Adaobi hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes adults make mistakes. But what matters is that you are safe and loved." Chisholm crawled into her mother's lap. "I'm happy you came home early that day," she whispered. The simplicity of that sentence carried more weight than any legal document. Adaobi held her daughter tightly. "Me too," she said. Weeks passed. Court dates were scheduled. Financial reviews completed. The attempted 5 million naira transfer was permanently cancelled. Additional safeguards were placed on all accounts. Miss Taite left the estate entirely. Rumors circulated, but Adaobi refused to engage. Emeka attempted reconciliation twice. Flowers once. A long apologetic letter another time. Adaobi read it carefully, but emotion no longer clouded her judgment. Trust, once fractured that deeply, required more than regret. It required transformation. And she no longer felt responsible for guiding him through it. One afternoon, as she stood in her living room reviewing new interior design proposals, sunlight streaming through the tall windows, she realized something quietly powerful. The house no longer felt heavy. It felt hers. Not because his presence was gone, but because fear was gone. Uncertainty was gone. Betrayal had forced clarity. And clarity had restored control.